Today we seem to have a big problem with teenagers, and that some of them are out of control, and parents are losing their skills. What tips can you give to a parent of a teenager so the parent can survive the teenager?
There's lots written about what parents can do during their kids' teenage years. It all looks easy on paper, but having been a parent of several teenagers, the actual fact is always more difficult than what's written in the papers or in the books. There are several tips that I found as a parent and as a pediatrician. The first is to not lose your cool. Once you start to get excited and emotional and react in a very hyper fashion, that often just creates the equal and opposite reaction in the teenager. And that's what you don't want, because it is an emotionally turbulent time for teenagers. They're looking for their own identity. They're trying to mark their place in the world. They're feeling defeats and successes and failures with their peer group, who are the most important. It's a tough time. So you don't want to ramp that emotion up. That's the first thing. The second is you need to be vigilant about the time spent outside the home. That's not so easy. But that doesn't mean you can't have guidelines. They need to be flexible. They need to have some degree of appreciation that sometimes special events occur. But that doesn't mean you don't have check-in. You don't have a guideline as to when you are able to come home. Seatbelts are not an option. And that you really do, as a parent, need to know when those kinds of things are happening to their child that may be putting their child at harm. Now, I will say, pediatrician, writer, all that stuff. Were my kids perfect? No way. Did my kids have experience with alcohol that I didn't know about till later? You bet. Was there drug use in my family? No, I don't think so, but we were lucky. But we kept in constant touch with our kids, and that was a very important piece of what got us through those turbulent years. The turbulent years will happen. Don't think you're going to escape them. Some may be more than others. Girls and mothers and boys and fathers tend to have a little bit more of issues because they're looking for their own identity. That's part of development. Very important to go through that, even with the stormy times, to get to the other side where they do achieve a sense of who they are and a sense of successful independence. But those turbulent years just need to be understood, that the more communication, the more understanding, some flexibility, some things are not allowed, i.e., dangerous driving or certainly driving with intoxication. None of those are allowed. Other risky behaviors that you really need to make them realize that this is potentially going to be life-threatening to them. Most kids will get that. Being there for them at all terms is really what the cliche is used, but it's the truth. And that's not so easy. But nevertheless, that's the key. Being there for them, especially when they're hurting, is the most important thing.
So it's important to have a bridge, or have a family meeting on a regular basis.
Right.
And you also could set some rules that if the kid knows that if he does this, this is the punishment. So in a way, they're punishing themselves.
Yeah, I think that, once again, corporal punishment is not the answer here. That actually can drive it to a more negative situation. The most important thing is there are rules, there's some flexibility, but there are some things that are out of bounds, but that there are consequences. Allowances, use of car, stuff like that are very, very strong rules. Cell phones, computer stuff has all become now the way of operating. Cell phones are the link of kid to kid. I now understand that when kids have parties, there's a sort of messages that go out via cell phone, so suddenly a party of 20 becomes a party of 200 because of the power of the cell phone. So that's a very important communication device that has a degree of clout if you say, we're going to stop that. And that's an extreme. You also want to keep the level of response according to the level of thing that's been committed. You don't want to overreach and overpunish when the amount of infractions has been minimal. At the same time, when those infractions are such that the kid is at risk or puts other kids at risk, that's a major deal. It needs to be met with an equally major response.
So in truth, it's the parents that survive the teenager.
In
the
truth,
teenager survive the parent?
In truth, each has to survive, but the parent is equally at risk for having a negative experience as the child is, if not more so. One of the things that often helps, and we use this with our daughter, in all honesty, is that other parents of your kids' peers are going through the same thing. They are experiencing the tumult, the issues of rejection, the sense of what is my child doing. So we developed a parent support group among my daughter and her friends' parents. And though our friends
a conspiracy?
What? Our friends hated it.
It's a conspiracy?
That's what they called it.
Oh.
We were the parent conspiracy. And the conspiracy, however, was very important because some families were handling it well and others were botching it. And the ones who were handling it well gave some tips to those who were having real difficulty with it. And I do believe that that sense of community around their kids' growth and development, even though our teenage girls would make fun of us, was better overall, especially for those parents who were really struggling with what to do. So use your sibling or your children's friends, many of whom you get to know because you've been together throughout school, and don't be afraid to have an evening sort of chat about, let's talk about how can we communicate better around our kids' issues, parties, and other issues that inevitably will come up. And it worked well for us, and it's worked well for other settings as well.
So when your children have teenagers, you get even?
Getting even is definitely not the right word to use. When my children have teenagers, we will try and give them some techniques to use as we used with our kids and with them. But you know what? They're going to have to experience it themselves. We'll give them, we hope, some guidelines, some ways to address difficult issues. They'll look to us because we've developed and continue to develop a very good communication with our older children, as now they have young children. Those guidelines, they look for, actually. Don't be shy about providing them, but don't be overly expectant that they'll follow everything you say. They're going to have to make their own mistakes and figure it out for themselves because their kids and their relation with their kids are different than you had with your own children. It's just the way it is as the next cycle goes through it. But being there for your older kids, grown kids with their own kids, is a very important part of their being reared as successful parents, just like hopefully we had with our parents. So passing that baton along successfully is all about good parenting that continues into good grandparenting.
A famous psychologist once said about adolescence, it's a form of paranoid schizophrenia that gets better. Is that true?
It's interesting. I have actually not heard that term, but there are certainly elements of it that are true. Teenagers often are very paranoid about their own independence, about what they're doing. They're worrisome about their invasion into their space. They often may say that you're saying certain things or meaning certain things when you're not. That's all part of the teenager's attempt to find out who they really are and to establish their own sense of identity. It's critically important that that process be allowed to go through, but it isn't easy. Teenagers are a huge challenge, and also doesn't sort of turn on and turn off. Some kids have milder forms, some kids get it at 15, some kids at 17, some kids started early at 13. So it's important to remember that you'll know it when it's going on, and just not lose your cool, as I said earlier.
But it gets better because they grow up a little bit quicker than you thought.
It gets better because these are normal processes for the most part. And the most important thing is just to keep things within bounds. And if you're able to do that, 18, 19 comes along, they go off to college or they move out of the house, and then they actually do begin to relate to others as a more adult fashion. And as a consequence, you now get the opportunity to see them in a whole different light, and they see you in a different light.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.